right, guys, so for all the OG 350Z enthusiasts, Skyline was one of the first to come out with a supercharger kit early on for the Z33 platform. But take a look at this thing. It's got a polished Skyline supercharger. It's an Eaton assembly that's on this bad boy. Customer just bought this car, and he was wondering why he couldn't keep his supercharger belt on. So we were able to fix a few of those issues, get the car on the dyno, so that's where we're at today. We replaced the pulley on the snout of the blower, and then also the tensioner pulley we replaced. So I don't know if you can see it, but this thing has quite amount of crazy wear on it. That's not helping the belt, and then the bearing doesn't spin as freely as it should. So our buddy Brian over at Superchargers Online, who's right next door to us, he has the perfect upgrade for these things. Not that these things were crazy and needed anything spectacular for a pulley, but that thing is made in the USA and will probably outlive that blower, which, speaking of which, we definitely have found a problem. Once we've got the belt on there and alive, keep it from jumping around, we found that it's only making 2.5 pounds of boost. So really shameful, not very good. So there's a little bit of oil coming out of the front of the snout on that thing. So we know the blower needs to come out and get rebuilt. But you know, really these things, when set up correctly, you know, we've done quite a few conversions on these to get rid of the 7th injector. So what Skyline used to do with these kits is run a 7th injector at the inlet right at the back past the throttle body. That's how it would deliver the additional fuel you needed. So you'd keep your stock injectors, you have that 7th injector, and you had a piggyback that would control timing, and it would control that 7th injector. Needless to say, problems arise, those things fail, and you don't know it, that injector isn't spraying when it needs to, you know what happens, you lose the motor. But with these things all set up, you know, really, these kits didn't make a whole lot of power. I believe they had different stages. I don't know if they up to a stage 3 or stage 2. I know they had a stage 2, but not sure on the 3s. But you know, you were lucky if you made about 320 wheel with the upgraded units. This car here really isn't doing any better than a naturally aspirated Z. In fact, because it has the blower, it's robbing it of power. So this engine, you know, could do better if you just pulled this thing off or had it rebuilt. So, you know, to be continued. We don't know if the customer is going to want to have us rebuild it, but you know, Brian right next door at Superchargers Online, this is his forte. He rebuilds all the Eaton, Magnuson, all the root style superchargers. So in any case, there you have it. At least it's making 2 pounds of boost. It's going to be running a little bit better, and it's probably making closer to about 200 wheel, you know, which is bad. But you know, we brought it up a little bit more, and its air fuel ratio is where it needs to be. So you know, at least the customer can enjoy it for a little bit longer till that supercharger completely gives out. Alrighty guys, we did our baseline on this R34 GT, and the customer has given his blessing to go ahead and do the Haltech Pro plugin for the R34 GT. So interesting story about this ECU is we actually sold this to a customer who purchased it online through our store sometime early last year, and customer, I don't know, after a month or two gets back to us and says, this thing's not working, it's a hunk of junk, what should I do? Take it back. And we said, well, send it back into Haltech, have them check it out, make sure it's good. So he did just that, and I don't know, probably 4 months after we hear from him, and he says that this thing's a piece of crap and that he has no faith in it, and it's not allowing anything to work. So we just happen to have an R34 GTT here, so we went ahead and said, okay, well, let's test this thing. Had him ship it to us. We mocked this thing up real quick. I just ran a hose from this bad boy into the intake manifold, and boom, thing started right up. Car ran with no issues. It wasn't doing anything that he was describing. So yeah, so it wasn't doing anything the issues that he was describing to us. So we sent him a video of it running and said, hey, this thing obviously works. So he basically replied back and said, this thing's a piece of crap. I don't want it anymore. And it's like, well, this is a special order item. Like, what are we going to do with this? I can't give it back to Haltech. So he thought he was entitled to a full exchange. And it's like, this thing works. You bought it. There's probably something going on with your car at that point. So our store policy is essentially, you have a month. And if it's a defective item, it'll fall under the manufacturer's warranty. Clearly this item works. There's no problem with it. And he thought he was entitled to full replacement. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. You know, it's been over 9 months since he had it, and it's working. But in any case, we're gonna be putting this bad boy in, and we're gonna see what we can get out of this R34 GTT. So all we're gonna do is a boost solenoid from Haltech, the Pro plugin, install our intake air temperature sensor. Damn, you hear that? That's detonation. That's knock. It's bad for it. It's gonna kill it, dude. Nah, he's got too much advance. So yeah, we're gonna make this a real simple install. Haltech boost solenoid, we'll leave the boost fixed, probably keep it around 13 pounds of boost, up from the 5 and 6 pounds that it was making on our baseline. Put in an intake air temperature sensor in the charge pipe, and we'll be off to the races. So let's see what we can do for power by putting in a Pro plugin and a boost solenoid. All right, so JD and I are gonna tag team this install. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna remove this cast charge pipe, and we're gonna drill and tap for our intake air temp sensor. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do that. While JD is doing that, I'm gonna work on the wiring, and we'll get everything wired up to the 16-pin Tyco that is on our Haltech. So we have our auxiliary inputs and outputs on that thing. So we'll have one of our outputs for that solenoid, one of our inputs will be for the intake air temp, and then we just need to run our vacuum line off manifold into where the ECU is gonna be, so that we have our map, our MAP reference. All right, we've drilled our charge pipe with a 1/2-inch drill bit. We are gonna be using the 14mm by 1.5 intake air temperature sensor. And so we've got our tap set up for that, and we'll go ahead and begin tapping it. It's nice with the aluminum, it's nice and soft, taps really easy. All right, we chose to do it in the cast pipe because it's got a good thickness to it, so we can actually have a good amount of meat for the threads. So there it is, boom. And you'll notice that these sensors already have a form of Loctite on them and a sealant, so very nice. We'll get this all cleaned up, and then we can reinstall our charge pipe. All right guys, we have our boost solenoid hooked up. All our wires are run through, our IAT is installed, wires run through for that, and we run our map sensor signal hose. So take a look, we've got it all plumbed into the 16-pin Tyco connector. Make sure you use, if you're gonna be wiring in your own connectors for this stuff and all your wiring, use a 22 gauge wire, because otherwise it's gonna be a real bitch to get your wire through this Tyco connector. So that's all plumbed, ignition's on, we're connected, and the next business of order is just making sure we have a base map loaded up, and we're gonna make sure that we set up our inputs and our outputs and all that. So we're gonna start by making sure we have our primary map sensor. That's gonna be manifold pressure sensor 1, and that's gonna be on onboard map sensor. And just take the time to take a look at everything, all our little settings. The base map should have everything honestly ready to go. And we're going to add our input for our IAT. So there you have the onboard pressure sensor. So we're using that. We're not going to be using anything additional. I put the IAT on AVI 2, so air temperature sensor 1. We're going to enable the pull-up resistor because it's a temperature sensor you need to have a pull-up resistor. And we're going to go to ATS, and we're going to make sure we have the right calibration for this. Scroll down to temperature. All right, this one is going to be our Haltech 1/4 inch, and we'll reboot that, and we can kind of get an idea that air temperature is pretty close. It's 77 degrees. We'll go ahead and do our throttle position calibration, make sure our TP is set, and then we'll fire it up, and then we'll check our base timing and make sure that the timing that we lock here on the Haltech is exactly what our timing light shows on the mechanical side of things. So we'll go ahead and we'll do that next. All right guys, so we have our timing light hooked up. It's definitely reading advanced. You can tell also on the crank angle sensor that it is in the advanced portion. So we've locked the timing. These RB25s this year calls for 15 degrees of timing like a VG30 does. RB26s are 20 degrees of timing at base idle. So we're gonna lock our timing to 20 degrees. Dan is gonna loosen up the crank angle sensor and we'll go ahead and get that thing dialed in. All right guys, we've got our R34 GTT. We've made a few pulls on it, and what we noticed as we were increasing the boost is it was leaning out on us. So what we've done is pretty common with these Nissans is they have a fuel pump controller. So the first thing we did is bypass the fuel pump controller, and lo and behold, that solved all our fuel pressure drop. So now we've got plenty of fuel. We've got the boost turned up, but we noticed that at the top, boost is starting to drop off a little bit. So Danny and I are gonna check to make sure we don't have any boost leaks. So we're gonna smoke leak test it right now. And if we find something, we'll go ahead and we'll get that addressed and we'll continue to make a few more pulls. So we're up about 11 pounds of boost, but at the top, we're still dropping pretty good to about 6-7 pounds. So we wanna make sure we're not dropping 5 or 6 pounds right now. So let's go ahead and get it smoked and we'll go on to the next step. All right guys, so we smoked this bad boy and we found a couple of leaks. The most significant one is at the recirc valve to that charge pipe. So you can't really tell anything's wrong, but once we had smoke on it, we could see between the flange and the valve, it's just leaking out. So we pulled the 2-bolt that holds that valve to that charge pipe and we found that there is no gasket whatsoever. So we've made our own little gasket. We are in the middle of smoking it right now again and seeing if we have any additional leaks. So it's always gonna go to the easiest place it can escape to. We wanna double check, we'll smoke it again, make sure that leak is fixed, and we'll move on to see if we have another leak. So let's go ahead and we'll do that. And if we don't happen to find anything, we'll go ahead and we'll make some more dyno passes. All right guys, we have gotten through most of our dyno tuning and fixed our boost leaks, and we are doing really, really good. So we've got the boost up to about 11-12 pounds of boost. That's as much as we can make safely on 91 octane with this thing. I really don't know what it has in the tank for fuel. I'm hoping the customer did put 91 in it, but nonetheless, we did really, really well. We were making about 300 wheel at 11 pounds of boost, and we've picked up about 60 to 70 wheel torque on this bad boy across the entire RPM band. So not bad. Again, love me my Haltech ECU, just a boost solenoid, the Haltech intake air temp, and we have the ability to make the adjustments we need on this bad boy. And if the customer ever wants to run flex fuel, not a problem. All we need to do is accommodate for the sensor, upgrade the fuel pump, injectors, and we can run E85 with this thing. So all in all, really, really happy with the results.